Morning, John Gilkison, Aerostealth here, and it is Thursday, November 20th, 2025, and the title of today's video is Things That Ain't So. I wrote a blog on this a couple weeks ago, and I've been really busy with house painting and other fabrication work around the house, and I just didn't get around to shooting a video on it, so I'm kind of revisiting this thing in my own mind. And how this came about was that I was on Facebook and I was looking at a post where someone was talking about an economy car, and it had a towing hitch on the back, and some other person posted mockingly that what are you going to tow with that, the air? And that set off a whole parade of amusing thoughts in my mind, because that's exactly what all of us are towing when we drive our cars. We're towing the air. Fact is, it's a predominant force that's involved in moving a vehicle down the highway. So I never really left a comment, but anyway, that's what where this blog sprung from. So, what I wanted to say is I have 10 points here, kind of like Moses, coming down from Mount Sinai. The aerodynamic drag is the largest component of road load at speeds over 40 miles per hour. Because rolling resistance is a linear function, and I'm checking, make sure I'm running here. Rolling resistance is a linear function, whereas aerodynamic drag increases in an exponential fashion. Now here I'm going to show you. This blue line here represents rolling resistance, and here of course is speed across the bottom, and the line that goes way up to a peak is aerodynamic drag. Okay, so what you're seeing here in this particular example, this is a drag coefficient of a Tesla basically, and it's showing roughly that aerodynamic drag is the same as rolling resistance at speeds around 70 miles per hour, which is where my thumb is right here. And you go on up to right there where my other finger is. Okay, you see that? So now that's a Tesla. My car, an Ioniq 5, has a higher coefficient of drag, so its breakover point where aerodynamic drag equals rolling resistance is around 40 miles per hour, not 70. So that's pretty amazing when you think about it, and it has a lot of important points to it on energy consumption. Aerodynamic drag primarily takes place behind the vehicle, where the air is trying to come back together. A lot of people think they see a pointy nose on a car or something, and they think that's what's lowering the drag coefficient or whatever. And it's not so. It's the wake area behind the vehicle. So those are two things that ain't so. And this brings up a point, and that's something called coefficient of drag area. See, coefficient of drag is a dimensionless number, really. It doesn't mean anything without other context. So, I'll give you an example. My truck is routinely capable of 18 miles per gallon. I have a Ford F-150 for towing a fifth wheel trailer, which we're in right now. And it's got a coefficient of drag of 0.40. Okay, maybe a little lower with the bed cover on. However, when I hook up my 8,000-pound trailer and go down the road, instead of getting 18 miles per gallon, I'm getting 9. And that's at 60 miles an hour. And you think, well, that's horrible. The drag's really increased. Well, yes and no. The actual, no one publishes the coefficient of drag for my truck and trailer combination. However, just by the stats I've given you already, it can be figured out. And what that amounts to is, what would the coefficient of drag have to be to cause a decrease by 50%, or an increase by 50% of the energy consumed, or a decrease by 50% of the MPGs. So what you have is the truck has 36 square feet of frontal area, but the trailer has 100 square feet of frontal area. Now the trailer in the rear is only 8 by 8, so the wake area of the trailer is only 64 square feet. And that's a clue to something. So the coefficient of drag area is the coefficient of drag of the truck times the area. So an example of my truck, it's 0.4 times 36 square feet, which is 14.4. That's the coefficient of drag area of the truck. Now, for the fuel consumption to double would mean the coefficient of drag area would have to also double. In that case, let's just round it off. It's coefficient of drag area of my truck and trailer combination has to be around 29. Okay, so once you figure that out, this tells you immediately, if you do back mathematics, that the because you take 100 square feet and you say, well, how do I come out with 29? Well, 0.29 times 100 square feet is 29. Well, that is the coefficient of drag of my truck-trailer combination. It's lower than my truck by itself. It has to be, because I'm pulling so much more frontal area through the air that, and this is a revelation really, because you look at the truck and the trailer and you say, oh wow, that creates a lot of drag, and it does, but it creates less drag than it would if the coefficient of drag was the same as the truck. So I found that amazing when I figured that out. So this is the kind of things that are surprising and aren't in the popular wisdom. Here's another myth that's out there. I've spent a lot of time on just these first 2 points, but there isn't enough energy production capability to replace fossil fuels, especially for transportation. This is patently false. Electric vehicles only need 1/3 of the energy. So consequently, if you want to replace fossil fuels, you don't need to replace all the energy used by transportation in the form of electricity. You only need to replace 1/3 of it. And then when you consider the fact that there's so much off-peak generating capacity sitting around idle, well, right away we have a great deal of capacity that's just underutilized. And what the grid lacks is storage. Well, guess what? Electric cars are storage. So, and this brings up point number 4, and this is just a minor point, but I've had a lot of pundits, I've been talking online, people say, oh, diesel locomotives, in people's minds, diesels really have a lot of power, and yes, diesels are more efficient and they're more torquey than gas engines. However, a diesel locomotive, in this example, the diesel in the diesel locomotive only runs a generator. It's electric motors that turn the wheels of the diesel locomotive. In that sense of the words, they're the first series hybrid, preceding the Chevy Volt by a number of decades. So, let's see, we'll turn this over, what I got to do. And you couldn't power a locomotive on the rails with just a diesel directly. There are no transmissions that could do this, gearing or anything else. Electric motors are so torquey they can do it without a transmission, just your single speed. Another thing that I run across a lot online, and it's still out there, people seem to think that when you're towing, that mass is the main criteria. In other words, the heavier the trailer, the more it's going to cost you on fuel. And yes, it does take a little more energy to tow more mass. But according to Newton's law, you know, once an object gets up to motion, it takes another force to stop it. It wants to keep on going, in other words. So it does increase the rolling resistance a little bit, having more mass. As I showed you, it's linear. However, the biggest factor in energy consumption is not rolling resistance, as I've already demonstrated, but again, it's aerodynamic drag. Unless, of course, you want to drive on the moon. The advent of the electric truck, think Ford Lightning Silverado here. Many pundits seem to think there's some kind of special weakness that, you know, because like with a Ford Lightning, which has 320 miles of range, well, towing a trailer, it might only have 150 miles of range, and because you're not charging back to 100%, you don't drive down to zero, you might only have 100 miles of range before you have to charge again. And that's a no bueno. It doesn't even work for me. I wouldn't do it. I want to charge every 100 miles. However, it's so they will find that a gas or diesel truck only getting 8 or 10 miles per gallon towing is just fine, laudable in fact. But as soon as you get an electric truck getting 28 to 35 miles per gallon equivalent, and it just doesn't work for them. So they got their thinking caps on backwards. They must believe that these higher efficiency numbers for electric trucks are just a fantasy. That this whole thing about MPG-E equivalent just means it's fake or something. I don't know. Inexplicably, this is 0.7. The answer's staring him right in the face. The average Bubba out there with these big truck towing trailers and stuff, it really admires the semi-truck driver. They're their heroes. And yet here's these trucks going down the highway with full aerodynamic shrouds that blend the trailer right into the truck. And then they have aerodynamic fencing on the side and all that. That's the key. Trucking companies save millions of dollars in fuel cost every year by lowering the aerodynamic drag of their big rigs. And yet, Bubba will tow a trailer down the road with this giant gap between the truck and the trailer. And then when you consider the cab ends, and then the flat bed is even lower than the trailer, and they just their eyes glaze over. They don't understand that they're looking at a split wing, and that not blending the trailer into the tow vehicle is the cause of all their misery. So, and then that brings me to 0.8, and that's this return on investment. I don't understand it. I ran into this decades ago when we were trying to convince people to buy compact fluorescent light bulbs over regular light bulbs. And I can remember one time I was at work, this is back in the 1990s, and I was showing guys at work a 25 watt compact fluorescent light bulb versus a 100 watt incandescent light bulb, and the light bulb cost like $10 to buy, and that's just a non-starter for them. And so I went through all the mathematics to show them that over the life of the bulb, 10,000 hours, that the let me see here, I have some numbers for you. It was a savings of 75 watts for every hour burned. It would save $90 over its whole life. So the $10 cost was meaningless. So if it saves $90 and it costs you $10 and the incandescent light bulb's free, you're still ahead $80. Simple math. And yet, that's what exactly I had a guy telling me. He says, well, I steal all my light bulbs at work. I told him it didn't matter. It's costing you more to steal light bulbs than it is if you pay $10 for this one. And I just lost them right there. It's a step too far, I guess. So this is a deferred return on investment, and it applies to everything. It applies to the reason I drive an electric car, the reason I have solar panels on my house. We just got our electric bill today. Our electric bill is $11.18 for the whole month. I have a relative who drives a car that he brags is paid for. That's why he likes it. And it's it had a couple 100,000 miles on it. And he said, yeah, it's paid for. And I said, yeah, but you've spent $20,000 on fuel since you bought the car. So that just doesn't register with them. The car gets 28 miles per gallon. Our car gets 112 miles per gallon. And it turns out that we would spend over the same time period, 200,000 miles, we'd spend $3,000 on energy, not $20,000. We'd save $17,000. And this is what I'm talking about, a fellow who plays the stock market, understands investments, likes to go for a return on investments, and yet this is abstract to him somehow. And this brings me to point number 9. It's a base rate fallacy. There's many aspects of science and technology where this comes up. I call it letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. In electric cars, renewables, you'll often run into people who will point to one aspect, one problem with an idea or technology. That means it's just a non-starter. We can't use it. And I'll give an example. With electric cars, it's cobalt. Oh, they use cobalt in batteries. There's child labor in the Congo involved. We just can't drive electric cars. Well, yes, there is small amounts of cobalt used in batteries. Used to be. They're getting rid of it. But we're talking about a technology that's 3 times more efficient than a gas car. As I just pointed out, saves tens of thousands of dollars over its lifetime. However, they use vast amounts of cobalt to refine gasoline, but no one ever mentions that. We don't want to talk about that. My friend Joseph pointed out that this problem came up with the COVID vaccine, which in a very small percentile, far less than 1%, 0.001% percentile, that the COVID vaccine itself could cause a certain kind of heart problem in some individuals. And however, the same problem, the same health problem related to your heart function was an order of magnitude far greater in people who did not take the vaccine. That's letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And this leads me to my final comment, which is experts. Recently we had Bill Gates talking about how we should just abandon emissions goals and work on adaptation. And I don't happen to like Bill Gates, many people do. But however, just because he's filthy rich, because he's a computer expert and made a lot of money at it, runs Microsoft, that his area of expertise, and he thinks it's so, extends to any subject he decides to pick up. Whether it's energy issues or carbon emissions or whatever. And it's just not so. Just because you have a high level of expertise in one area doesn't mean it applies to another. And this overconfidence can lead to such individuals making pronouncements, which many people take seriously, as if they are true. And they may not. It may not be so. So worse here, his fame and notoriety may make him just about the last person in the world we should be taking advice from. As the lemmings continue to head towards the cliff of near human extinction, apparently he's going to sit there and wave, "This way, come this way." Well, this is a long video. Ran a lot longer than I expected, so I'm going to let you go here. Safe sailing, everybody. Bye-bye.